what is it, A Dance in the Country? Dance in the Country season finale. Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached the end of Bridgerton season 4, and it's your boy Icon back with another with a final Bridgerton review for you. And before we get started, hit that notification bell, like and or subscribe. Check out my other YouTube channel, Bright Eyes Media, for all your fashion desires. I'd love to see you there because we got a lot of stuff coming up this summer. And let's kick off the final episode because it was very spicy indeed. So Sophie in jail. Sophie in jail. She got locked up. And, and it was funny because she was trying to tell the guard, she was like, there's been a misunderstanding. And then she was like, did I get a phone call? And then, she told him, she was like, oh, can you please get a hold of one of the servants at Penwood House? And then the guard told her, he was like, look, he said, you're a fucking maid and you just got arrested for stealing. He said, your defense can involve another servant because nobody's going to believe that. They're going to think they're just making that up because that's what, servants do and all y'all stick together. He said, you get one phone call. he said, if you're going to use this one phone call, use that call and make sure that the person you are calling actually gives a shit about you and thinks that you're worth the trouble. Because if it's anybody of lower stature, they said that Mrs. Penwood would bury them in an instant. So she's like totally fucked. And see, and here's the problem now. The girl, she never told Benedict that she was the lady in the mask. Like, she never confessed her feelings for him when she had an opportunity. Now that she's in prison, I like, bitch, if you don't pick up that phone and call this man, like you're doing it to yourself. But of course, she never calls him. So Cho comes downstairs, her wicked stepmama come downstairs, and she's just like, confess, bitch. And she's like, I will not confess to give you what you desire when you've stolen everything from me. Which is true. I mean, she stole like her livelihood and everything. So she was just like, no one's going to take the word of a peasant girl. And she's like, you will rot in prison for all eternity. Ha ha ha. So now Benedict actually went down to the docks. I actually laughed like when they said that. He said he got down to the docks. There were two boats that were going in opposite directions, and he didn't know which one was which. And then this shit was wild. He was just like, oh, I don't know what to do. He was like, but I can't lose Sophie to the Americans. And I was like, wait, what? He was like, oh, I will not lose her to the Americas. And I was just like, hold on. I was like, what you trying to say, brother? What's wrong with the Americans? What you got against the Americans? But then, Miss Varley, the old feathering maid, Varley, she actually had a change of heart because she was at Penwood House and the eldest daughter, Lee, she got proposed to. And then after that, like, Posey got into a little bit with the mom because she found out that the mom had Sophie arrested. And she was like, Sophie did nothing, mama. And then she was like, I will hear none of this foolishness. And then she was like, Sophie wasn't a thief. And like, she did nothing but care for us and love us all. And then that's when Varley, she's like, shit. Because remember, Varley was the one that sold Sophie out, and then got her locked up. So then she kind of had a change of heart. She went down to the Penwood House and she was just like, I want to make amends for what I've done to Sophie. And then, like the head guy, one of the servants over there, he was like, well, she's at Bridgerton House. So let's go to Bridgerton House. So then they go to Bridgerton House. And this shit was funny too because, Varley, she's been working for the, for the Featherins for 3 seasons. And then this season she started working for the Penwoods. And then she ended up going with them when they ended up moving to a new house across the street from the Bridgertons. She goes into the Bridgerton house, downstairs where all the maids are, where the servants are, where they do the cooking and everything. She's walking downstairs. She's like, oh shit, is that an automatic pig roaster? And I was like, this is what you're worried about? She was like, is that good china? Because although she's like a maid or a servant or whatever, she's never been in a situation where she's had like the top notch, servant, utensils. She's never had like the finest servant, utensils that money can buy. She gets to Bridgerton house. She's like, oh shit, y'all motherfuckers got 2 ovens. Like, I actually just thought like that made me laugh on the inside. And then they ended up speaking to, Sophie's friend, the one with with the severed hand. I can't remember this girl's name. And then she went upstairs, and then she actually tried to talk to the Bridgertons because Varley didn't go to the Bridgertons herself. She basically told the girl, and then the girl went upstairs to go talk to the Bridgertons. But then at that point, that's when Benedict came back, and then he was just like, oh, I can't find her. And the rest of the family was just like, oh, but where could she be? He was like, no, she's across seas somewhere. And then, that's when the girl, she was like, Mom, she was like, I have a, and then nobody was listening to her because she's a servant. And then the head servant for the Bridgertons, she was like, quiet, please. This girl has something to say. And then she was just like, well, she was like, I have good news that Mr. Bridgerton won't need a boat because Sophie's still here and she's locked up in jail. So then now we end up getting to Sophie's trial. And again, because she's a peasant girl, she ain't got no friends, she ain't got no family, she doesn't have a lawyer, and it's her word against the word of a lady. They were just like, well, Miss Peck, I sentence you to, and then as soon as he was about to lay down judgment, Bridgerton came in and he was like, seize this at once. He was like, this girl belongs to me, and she must be in our possession as well. And then that's when she was just like, she's like, on what grounds? She's like, we will not listen to a second son. He's like, how dare you besmirch my honor after all the things that you've done. So everybody's going back and forth. The judge is like, look, it's like, and then kudos to Violet because when the judge was like, who are you, sir? He was like, I'm Benedict Bridgerton, second son, to Anthony Bridgerton. He was like the son of the Viscount, the late Viscount. And then Violet came out of nowhere. She said, also the brother of the Duke of Hastings. I was like, damn, look at you. Look at you name dropping, trying to put some clout on the table. I was like, that was actually pretty cool. I was like, cool moment. But then, so then after that, she was just like, Sophie's my lady's maid. And then she's like, I need her to run my household. She said, my household cannot function without her services. And then the judge was like, look, y'all motherfuckers is crazy. He said, y'all got 1 week to figure this out amongst yourselves. Because then if you don't, we're going to come back and then, we're going to decide what to do with Sophie. Then Cho was like, there will be no agreement. This bitch is going to jail. And so then they're in the cab. They're in the Bridgerton cab. And then that's when, Sophie was just like, I appreciate everything that you've done for saving my ass. And then Benedict told her, he was like, why you ain't just call us from, you should have just called me. He's like, why do you ain't get us from the beginning? And she was like, well, because I left in the middle of the night. She was like, I thought that I pushed you all away. He was like, I'll have none of this rubbish. And he was like, Sophie, we care for you. And then, they put him upstairs and they actually gave her a room right next to Bridgerton because when the head maid, she was just like, oh, here are your quarters. She's like, no, Mom. She's like, my quarters are upstairs. Well, the servants are. She was like, bitch, like, you are a guest of the Bridgerton household and you will be treated as such. And then after that, that's when, like, Violet also found out that she was related to, to the Gunn family. Basically, like the Penn, that's when she found out she was a Penwood, but she also found out that she was the daughter of the late, Mr. Gunn. So she's speaking to Lady Danbury because she's like, what can we do? And then, Alice, she got word of all this information, and then she came up with a plan of her own, trying to walk in her own shoes. Sophie ended up sneaking into Benedict's room, where the two of them confessed their love for each other. Then she was like, I was afraid you wouldn't see me as an elegant lady, but as a maid. And then he was like, but I love you because you're the first person who's ever just saw me in a room full of many people. And, she was like, I love you, Benedict Bridgerton. He was like, I love you, Sophie Peck, even though you're of lower class. And then the two of them made passionate love in the bathtub. And then after that, that's when we got to the point where they were talking. And then Sophie said to her, she was like, I was just so upset because my father, he was a nobleman. He was one of the, what she said, she was one of the dukes. He was the seventh Duke of Earl. And then she said that, I thought he loved me and he would leave something for me in his will, but he left me nothing but despair and pennies. And then that's when Benedict told her, he was like, wait, have you actually seen the will for yourself? And then she was like, no, I was going off of the word of what Cho told me. And then he was like, why would you listen to Cho? He was like, clearly she doesn't like you. He said, this woman clearly despises you. He was like, why would you believe anything that she says? And then she was like, I don't know, I just did. And he was like, man, benefit, he wanted to pull his hair out. So then Sophie came up with an idea. She went to Eloise, and then she asked Eloise if she can get her into the Penwood house so she can find the will. Now with Eloise going to the Penwood house to go speak to Krista Kappa, the two of them actually made up and, like they put the past behind them. And then, Eloise at one point, she apologized to Highest, and then she told her, she was just like, look, she was like, this life suits you. And she's like, don't give up because she said, I'm slowly learning that love is a magical thing. Sophie finds her daddy Will, and then when she finds the will, she read something that blew her mind entirely. And then after that, that's when Alice got everybody together because she was just like, oh, Lady Danbury failed with the queen, but she was like, I have another plan. And there's like, Miss Sophie, you're going to the ball. So the queen ended up throwing a goodbye party for Lady Danbury. She said that she decided to leave London and go elsewhere, which was shade upon shade. But then the party was in her honor. And then after that, Alice had, she put something together where they got Sophie into the party. Everybody was all dressed up and everything. And then Alice put the Bridgertons along with Sophie in the same room with the Penwoods, with the Penwood family. So when they were all there, Sophie told her straight up, she said that I found the will. And it turns out that my father left both me and Lee and Posey an equal share of a dowry. And you stole my dowry to give it to Lee to entice somebody to marry her. And then Lee was like, Lee looked at her, she was like, Ma, she's like, you think I couldn't get a husband on my own? Like, you had to bribe them with double the dowry? And then, she was just like, that money belonged to me. And then she was like, no, that money was mine. She was like, we were happy. Your father was supposed to take care of us, but then your ass came along and you took the love that should have been ours. And then she was like, no, she's like, my father loved you all and he loved me as well. And then and then she told her, she was like, well, first of all, even if that's the case, she said, you're still going to jail because you impersonated a lady. And then that's when Violet stepped in and she was just like, you better dismiss those charges, bitch, because you basically just like lied on somebody's will. You embezzled funds. So she said, if you ruin us, we gonna ruin you. So it's like tit for tat. So what you want to do, And then even like earlier, Benedict had a conversation with Violet because Violet was telling her, she was like, out of all of my children, she was like, you're most like me. And then he was like, how, mother? He was like, I'm a wild stallion that runs the grounds for free. She was like, yes, because back in the day, she was like, you were me. She was like, I was wild and I was free spirited. And she was like, you're the most like me, the person who I used to be. And then he was like, what the fuck happened to that person? And then she was like, I got married and I fell in love and everything, but then, because like Violet stepped up and put boots to asses, like in that situation, he was just like, Benedict was like, oh, the younger you would be proud of who you are right now. And then that's when Alice went to the Queen, and then she told the Queen, she was like, oh, Your Majesty, because Lady Danbury, she told the Queen the whole story about how Sophie being a maid and, how Benedict fell in love with her and how, like, he nursed her, but she nursed him back to health in the countryside and everything. And then the Queen was like, what the fuck do I give about a maid? She was like, he can't carry. She's like, he can't marry a maid. She was like, get that girl out of here at once. And then that's when Alice was like, no. Like, when she told the Queen no, Lady Danbury just sat down like, oh, shit. She's like, here comes the tea. And then the Queen had a look on her face like, how dare you speak ill of the Queen? But then Alice said, she was just like, look, she said, back in the day, when you came into this house, nobody wanted you here either. And she said, look at you. She's like, you fought. She's like, you pioneered for everything that you have and you rose to the top and you're one of the best women to ever sit on the throne. She's like, they keep calling them zebras. They talk about zebras. She's like, you brought zebras, like to the ground. She was like, you love gossip. She's like, you love colorful banter. And then she said, like, you're one of the best ladies. But she told her, she said, but for all the good that you do and for everything, she said, you kind of lost your way to the point where you've forgotten about the regular people. You forgot about the servants. You forgot about like the people without a title. And she said the problem with that is not only can these people, she said, if a non-titled woman can earn the love and admiration of Benedict Bridgerton, she was like, shit, she's like, Your Majesty, you're actually missing all the good gossip because you're only worried about what's happening like in the elite stature, she said, and that's a crime. So then, after that, she kind of like tickled her fancy, and then she was like, okay, she's like, okay, child, we'll play this game. So then the Queen kicks in the door, everybody sees, and it's like, oh shit, Your Majesty. And they were like, who are all these people? And then they said, oh, this is Sophie Gunn, because the lie that they came up with, because see, the thing is, the Queen already knows the entire story, but because Sophie's a maid, she can't be like, yeah, go ahead and marry her. So when the Queen bust through the door, they were like, oh, this is Sophie Gunn. They said that she's a member of the Penwood house, but they said, because the thing is, not her father, but I guess her father's brother or cousin or something had passed away. And then they said, oh, Sophie is the daughter of the late, Lord Gunn. And then she was like, is that true, y'all? She's like, is that true, child? And then she said, and then Sophie said, she was like, because of my education and my background and my blood, she said, I am in fact a product of the Penwood house. I like how she worded that. What I'm saying? Like, because she is like, like she's a product of the Penwood house. And then she was just like, and then she turned to Alice and she was like, I thought you said she was a man. And she's like, I was mistaken, Your Majesty, my bad. And then she's like, huh. And then she goes, oh, wasn't there a matter of like shoe clips? They were like, no, Your Highness. She's like, there's nothing about shoe clips. She's like, oh, I think there was. But the funny thing is, like, when they said all that, and then they were like, oh, like Sophie, she's royalty, like she's a noble lady, and Benedict Bridgerton's fallen in love with her. The Queen looked at everybody, and she was like, first of all, you know that I know that y'all know I know y'all full of shit. She's like, we all know y'all. She's like, y'all know damn well I know y'all full of shit. But because everybody's going along with this bullshit, and because I said Benedict Bridgerton was going to marry, and if I go along with this bullshit, he going to get married, and I'm going to win my bet, I ain't gonna say nothing. But she said, but when she was like, I think there was a matter of shoe clips, that was her way of saying, like, motherfuckers, I ain't stupid. So she's like, I'm the queen, damn it. And then after that, she was like, carry on. And then she walked out. And then she said to Alice, she was like, bitch, you lucky I went along with that shit. Because she said, because otherwise it was gonna be your ass. And then she was like, thank you, your majesty. So then, and then she told Lady Danbury, she was like, that Alice girl, like, she brings new energy to the situation, disrespectful energy at best. But she's like, she's worth keeping around, especially when you leave. But then she started laughing because she was like, did these people really think I was that stupid? She was like, I only went along with this because it was the best gossip of the season. And then Lady Danbury, she was like, no, your majesty, she's like, the best thing of the season is that you're going to win your bet with Lady Whistledown. And then she was like, plus you enjoy a good laugh, your highness, because the queen enjoys watching people squirm. So when she come in the room, motherfuckers be pissing their pants, like, she love that shit. That's why her and Danbury was like laughing for like 20 minutes and everything. And then, then they held hands, and then she was like, I'm going to miss you, my friend. And she was like, I will miss you as well. And she was like, I command these tears to stop, which was it was a very touching moment for the two of them. And then after that, Sophie actually had a chance to dance on the floor with the rest of, the high society and the elite. Benedict proposed to her. Everybody was happy. Everybody rejoiced. Posey ended up getting a proposal from a man that she had admired because Lee's dowry went back to normal, because one of the conditions that they made back was that she would get her dowry back. So because the dowry wasn't 36,000 pounds, it was like half that. That the guy that was gonna marry Posey, he was like, nah, fuck that, because he's like, this bitch is broke. And that's crazy, because I mean, if anything, like, low key, they did that girl a favor, because he was only marrying her because he thought he was going to get a lot of money for marrying her. But then when he realized he wasn't getting as much money, like, he dipped. So the girl can find somebody else, but her sister found somebody. Sophie's going to marry Benedict Bridgerton now, and everybody's happy. And it was the greatest party of all time. Hyacinth did not sneak into this party. Alice, she triumphed. Lady Danbury feels good about leaving the tongue in her hands, and now everything is all hunky-dory. So then, the two of them, they go outside, they dance in the same place, where they met for the first time. And then when midnight came, he was like, are you going to flee this time? And then she was like, no, I'm going to be here forever. And then, they kissed and all this other stuff. Now, fortunately for Violet, because there was one dark cloud like over this silver lining. Also, John's cousin, she told Francesca that she was going to stay with her, and then she dipped when Francesca held her hand. Basically, the girl lesbian, and she liked Francesca. And because I guess lesbianism was frowned upon in like society, when she felt her feelings getting too close, like, she dipped, she bounced on Francesca, because she was like, I'm starting to have feelings for you, and it's wrong because you're my cousin's, like, wife and all that other stuff. But anyway, so Marcus showed up, and he said, oh, it's nice to know that the family business is in order. So he was like, now can we tell everybody that we're to be married? And then she was like, no, because she said that she's been a wife and a mother, for so long. She's actually getting reacquainted with the person she used to be before she got married. And she said that she's like, she cares for you. She's like, I care for you. I want to be with you. I want to build something with you, but I don't want to become a wife right now. And then Marcus, motherfucker, stood his ground, and I fucks with Violet Bridgerton. Like, I like Lady Bridgerton, but kudos to Marcus, because he was just like, well, I don't care what you want. He said, I respect your position. I respect what you want, but I also want things for myself. And he was like, what I wish is to be married and to have my bride. And he was like, and if you cannot provide me with that, he was like, first of all, like, you're over 50, you got like 9 kids. If you ain't trying to get married, he was like, fuck it. He's like, I'm out. So Marcus kissed her hand and bid her adieu, and then he walked away. And good for him. You know what I'm saying? Because he's been more than accommodating to her like this entire season. And now that it's like the one thing he was willing to put up with all this bullshit to marry her. And because she doesn't even want that now, he was like, all right, I'm wasting my time. I need to find somebody that I could actually marry. Marcus bounced on that ass. So that was cool. I think that was actually cool to see. And then in the post-credit scene, we're back at the cottage. We're in the countryside, back at the cottage where they spent so much time together. Anthony and Kate, they're back. And then with Anthony and Kate, Anthony told Benedict, he was like, never listen to me again, brother. He was like, because you finally have what you desire. And everybody was there, like all the people that cared about them, about their union was there. They got married, they kissed, and everything. And it was beautiful. She's a Bridgerton now, because he even said, he was like, finally you're a Penwood, but now I can't wait to make you a Bridgerton. And then we saw the poster, well, the picture that Benedict was working on. Now that he knows that it's Sophie, he actually painted her face in the picture, and then he even wrote his name on it. So who knows? Maybe he's gonna, like pursue his art career. Maybe him and Sophie are gonna live in the countryside now. But she has a title now. She's considered the daughter of a nobleman, so she can marry him. They're married, so now she's officially a Bridgerton. That was how this particular season ended. And for the love of God, thank you for tuning in. So this was good. Like I enjoyed this season. This season felt most like a Cinderella story to me. Like out of all the seasons, this one felt the most like magical, if you will. Like it had the most like intrigue, it had the most magic and everything. Like it made you feel like you were on a magical ride and you were looking into a Disney book. So I definitely like that. Oh, and also Varley ended up going back to Featherin House because she said that after the whole deal and after the party was over, she said that Cho came home and basically fired her ass, and then she went back to Lady Featherin because she was like, I just wanted an apology, Mom. And then she was like, you'll get no such thing. But she was like, oh, but I can apologize for not giving you a fair wage. And then she was like, that'll do, Mom. And then she was like, please come home, Farley, I love you so. And then now the two of them are back together, so which is actually cool. So she got her maid back. she got her maid back because she was treating the other one like complete shit. But it's cool. It's sad because the drama with Francesca is going to continue. Like we lost John, but at this point, unless Hyatt is ready to enter society and unless Gregory's also ready to enter society, the only person left at this point is Eloise. If the next season is going to be based on Eloise finding love, I like it, but I don't at the same time, because I feel like when Bridgerton comes to the end, when we get to the final season, when they say, first of all, it's 8 kids, 8 seasons. When we get to the final season and they're like, hey, everybody, this is it. Like, this is the 8th and final season of Bridgerton. The final season, in my opinion, should end with Eloise, of all people, finally getting married to an American. But if we get Eloise sooner, like I'm fine with that, because I guess that means we're going to end with Hyatt and like with Gregory. So that's cool. But that was it. Like I said, that was how Bridgerton season 4 concluded. And thank you for tuning in. So share your questions, comments, and concerns. Like, does Lady Danbury come back in season 5? Like what sort of hijinks? Who gets the next season? Who's going to be the focal point of the next season? Is Francesca about to become a lesbian? And then what happens with Violet? Is she going to be, like running off into the sunset, galloping all over the place? Does Sophie and Benedict come back in season 5? Share your questions, comments, and concerns down below, and let's continue to talk about it. Because I enjoyed it. Like, I definitely loved it. And I'm also looking forward to seeing the dynamic between the Queen and with Alice, because, like I said, she's basically the new Lady Danbury. And like she's like, she has fire and like vigor in her soul, and like it's definitely like cool to see. So like I said, I had no expectations. I mean, we done did Asian people, we done did black people. Like I said, we done did Indian people, we done did redheaded white people. I feel like the next step is Eloise is gonna fall in love with a Spanish guy, because we've done everything except Spanish people at this point. So that's the only thing that's missing. But like I said, let me know your thoughts, and we'll continue to bring you some more Bridgerton on Red Eyes Entertainment. Now, I did see the trailer for Lanterns, so the trailer for Lanterns, it looks good, but we're not getting that till August, unfortunately. But for Red Eyes Entertainment, we do have Daredevil Born Again coming up this month. We got Daredevil coming up this month, and I look forward to bringing you that Daredevil until we get another season of Bridgerton. And then I said we'll do Lanterns and everything else in between. Check me out all over social media, on X, on Instagram, on TikTok, where you can leave your questions, comments, concerns, always on YouTube. Put them in the comments. Let me know what you thought about Bridgerton. What was your favorite season of Bridgerton so far? Season 1, season 2, 3, or 4? What's your favorite season and why? For me, I feel like season 4 is second place for me. Season 3, so for me it goes, because season 1, because the Duke of Hastings is my dude. So for me it's going to be 1, 4, 2, and then 3. So that's how I rate them so far. Nothing against, nothing against season 3, but like I said, but the Duke of Hastings, like that's my dude, because him and Daphne was like, like at each other's faces. I said, but let me know what your favorite season of Bridgerton is so far. I said, check out my other reviews for my other TV shows and movies up on my YouTube channel. Check out my second YouTube channel, Bright Eyes Media, for all your fashion tastes and your fashion desires. And I look forward to bringing you more as we go on for 2026 and beyond. So that was it, guys. So thanks for tuning in. So signing off now, another Bridgerton in the household and another family member extended. And until then, God save the Queen as always. And we're out this.